The schools have to be open, right? Lock them all up.
Can you commit to their full... And were you surprised by the number of photos of Bill Clinton in the Epstein files? And can you commit to their full release by the end of the year?
If you were president, would you declassify, you can answer yes or no to these. Yeah. Would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah. I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.
The law was unambiguous. Signed by President Trump on November 19th, 2025, the Epstein Files Transparency Act gave the Justice Department 30 days to release every unclassified record in its possession related to Jeffrey Epstein. Investigations, prosecutions, communications, custodial records, everything. The statute was explicit on one point above all others. No record could be withheld on the basis of embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity, including for any government official, public figure, or foreign dignitary. Congress had watched decades of strategic opacity protect powerful men, while their victims aged into exhaustion, or worse, and it had finally written a law designed to make that impossible. The DOJ missed the deadline by 6 weeks. When it finally released 3.5 million pages on January 30th, 2026, survivors and their attorneys read the results and issued a statement in which the fury was so controlled it was almost clinical. Once again, survivors are having their names and identifying information exposed, while the men who abused us remain hidden and protected. The inversion was not subtle. A Wall Street Journal review found at least 43 victims' full names in the released files, including more than 24 who were minors when they were abused. Some names appeared over 100 times. Home addresses were retrievable through keyword searches. Attorneys who had given the department a list of 350 victims on December 4th, specifically to prevent exactly this, said the DOJ had apparently never run a basic keyword search against it. They counted thousands of individual redaction failures. The other direction told the opposite story. Members of Congress granted access to unredacted versions of the same files, came out and told reporters that powerful men's identities had been blacked out far beyond what the law permitted. Representative Ro Khanna spent 2 hours with the unredacted documents and then named 6 men on the House floor whose redactions he called illegal. Pressure from Representative Thomas Massie forced the DOJ to unredact Leslie Wexner's name, a man FBI documents had listed as an unindicted co-conspirator, after the department had quietly hidden it. Across different copies of the same document, the DOJ's own reviewers had applied different standards. A name redacted in one version appeared in plain text in another.
Let me show you the post on Truth Social overnight. The president saying House Republicans should vote to release the files because we have nothing to hide and it's time to move on from this Democrat hoax perpetuated by radical left lunatics in order to deflect from the great success of the Republican Party.
Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche said at a press conference that with more than 500 attorneys across multiple layers of processing, mistakes are inevitable. He encouraged anyone who spotted problems to email a tips address. More than 200 survivors asked federal judges to order the website taken down entirely.
After the DOJ accidentally revealed the names of nearly 100 survivors. The New York Times also reporting that dozens of images of young nude women were also released by the DOJ.
Calling it the single most egregious violation of victim privacy in one day in United States history. The department declared its obligations under the law complete. Buried inside the 3 million pages, barely noticed amid the volume of the release, was a document that reframes the entire history of this case. Federal prosecutors in Florida, investigating Epstein in 2007, had prepared a draft indictment charging Epstein and 3 unnamed co-defendants on 60 counts. The charges described a conspiracy spanning 2001 to 2005 to procure females under the age of 18 for money. The co-defendants were described as having been employed by Epstein. The indictment was never filed. Instead, prosecutors accepted a non-prosecution agreement. Epstein pleaded guilty to a single state charge of soliciting prostitution from a minor, and the deal, the one that granted immunity to unnamed co-conspirators and was never disclosed to victims, quietly buried a 60-count federal case that investigators had already built. The names of the 3 co-defendants remain redacted in the released version. Congress has asked the DOJ to explain. The DOJ has said its obligations under the law are complete. This is where the story stands now, 18 years after that indictment was drafted and never filed. The department that chose not to bring those charges has released a document proving it had grounds to, redacted the names of the people who would have been charged, and declared the matter closed.
Now, the president has repeatedly called this Epstein probe, which has gained steam on Capitol Hill, even in just recent days, a hoax.
The most important witness to any of this will not see it. Virginia Giuffre, who forced the world to take this case seriously through sheer refusal to be silenced, died on April 25, 2025, at her farm in Western Australia. She was 41. Her final months had accumulated cruelties in sequence. A domestic incident in January 2025, a restraining order preventing her from seeing her 3 children, a car accident, reported hospitalizations. She wrote on Instagram, weeks before her death, that she had been through hell in her 41 years, but that this, the separation from her children, was hurting her worse than anything Epstein had done. Her posthumous memoir, published in October 2025, contained new allegations that she had been trafficked to a sitting prime minister, whose name she did not disclose. Her father rejected the suicide ruling entirely, telling Piers Morgan that somebody got to her. The DOJ's January 2026 release accidentally made public a private email from fellow survivor Maria Farmer, describing the manner of Giuffre's death before it was caught and redacted. One more administrative failure in a release defined by them. In 2019, after Epstein died in his cell, Giuffre had posted publicly, "I am making it publicly known that in no way, shape, or form am I suicidal." She asked her followers that if something happened to her, they not let it go away. The woman who gave testimony that convicted Ghislaine Maxwell, who settled with Prince Andrew for a reported $12 million, who stood in a Manhattan courtroom and said, "The reckoning must not end, it must continue. He did not act alone." She did not live to read the files she spent a quarter of her life fighting to have released. Maxwell herself is alive, supposedly incarcerated, and negotiating. On February 9, 2026, she appeared virtually before the House Oversight Committee and invoked the Fifth Amendment more than a dozen times, declining to name co-conspirators, declining to describe her abuse of minors, declining to characterize the network's operations in any form. Then her attorney made an offer. Grant Maxwell clemency, and she will speak fully and honestly, explaining specifically why both Donald Trump and Bill Clinton are innocent of any wrongdoing.
Ms. Maxwell, did you at any time play any role in Jeffrey Epstein's activities involving the recruitment, grooming, or trafficking of young women or girls?
I invoke my Fifth Amendment right to silence.
The timing of that offer requires attention. In July 2025, Maxwell gave a 2-day deposition to Todd Blanche, the Deputy Attorney General who had previously served as Trump's personal defense attorney in his federal criminal cases. Shortly after that deposition concluded, she was transferred from a higher security federal facility in Florida to a minimum security camp in Texas. She did not invoke the Fifth Amendment with Blanche on the same subject matter she refused to discuss before Congress 6 months later. Democratic members of the Oversight Committee noted the discrepancy at length. No one has explained it. Trump, when asked about a pardon, said he is allowed to do it and declined to rule it out. The administration has said nothing definitive since. Maxwell has, in other words, converted her silence into a commodity, not a confession she is offering, but a performance of innocence for selected names, priced at her own liberty. That the White House is treating this as a live conversation rather than a reflexive refusal is, by itself, an answer of a kind. The depositions proceeding alongside all of this follow the same pattern. Leslie Wexner, the billionaire businessman whom FBI documents named an unindicted co-conspirator, who handed Epstein power of attorney over his entire personal fortune, whose Manhattan townhouse Epstein used as his own, sat for a 6-hour session on February 18, 2026, and described himself as a victim of a world-class con man. The committee's Democrats called the account implausible. What no one on the committee appeared to press was the question Vicky Ward raised publicly the same week. Leon Black, the private equity billionaire who paid Epstein more than $160 million, ostensibly for tax advice, after Epstein had already been convicted of soliciting minors for prostitution from a man who never graduated college, has not been called to testify at all. That payment has never been explained. It is the largest single transaction in the known financial record of this case, and the committee has not asked the man who made it to account for it under oath.
There would be no Epstein Island, there'd be no Epstein plane, there'd be no money to traffic women and girls. Mr. Epstein would not be the wealthy man he was without the support of Les Wexner.
Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and former President Bill Clinton were scheduled to be deposed on February 26th and 27th. The quality of those depositions, whether the questions reflect the seriousness of what the documents contain, or whether the hearings become a theater of non-answers, will establish whether congressional oversight intends to go where the DOJ would not. That is a low bar. So far, the committee has not cleared it. The rest of the world has not waited. A panel of independent experts appointed by the United Nations Human Rights Council issued a finding in February 2026 that the files reveal credible evidence of a global criminal enterprise, that the documented conduct, including what the panel named as sexual slavery, enforced disappearance, torture, and femicide, may reasonably meet the legal threshold of crimes against humanity. That finding carries no enforcement mechanism. What it carries is a standard, applied by people with no political reason to apply it generously. Governments that had such reasons acted differently. In Britain, 3 senior officials in Keir Starmer's government resigned after their names appeared in the documents. Prince Andrew lost his titles. National security advisors stepped down in Slovakia and Norway. Lithuania and Latvia opened formal human trafficking investigations. DP World replaced its board chairman. Each of these outcomes arrived without a trial, without a new indictment, without the DOJ declaring a renewed investigation. They arrived because the documents, even in their redacted and partially withheld form, contained enough to make certain associations professionally and politically untenable. The threshold for consequence, it turns out, does not require a conviction. It requires only that the evidence become visible to people who cannot afford to ignore it. The United States Department of Justice, which holds more evidence than any institution on earth, has declared the review complete and said no further prosecutions are expected.
Is the Department of Justice considering bringing any additional charges here?
Well, look, I can't talk about any investigations, but I will say the following, which is that
What the 3 million pages have produced, then, is not accountability. They have produced confirmation. Confirmation that the evidence existed, that investigators knew it existed, that prosecutors built a case and then traded it away, that the names of the people who should have been charged are in government files that the government is still finding ways not to release. The documents are not a reckoning. They are a receipt, issued 30 years late, for a crime that was allowed to compound because the people positioned to stop it were too implicated, too afraid, or too comfortable to try. Virginia Giuffre stood in a courtroom in 2019 and said, "I won't stop fighting. I will never be silenced." She meant it for as long as she was alive to mean it. The question of whether anyone with institutional power intends to honor that fight, or whether the machinery will simply wait out the noise until the next news cycle arrives, is not a question about Jeffrey Epstein anymore. He is, supposedly, dead. It is a question about what the government that protected him while he lived intends to do now that the protection has become visible. So far, the answer is familiar.
If you were president, would you declassify, you can answer yes or no to these, would you declassify the 9/11 files?
Yeah.
Would you declassify JFK files?
Yeah. I did a lot of it.
Would you declassify the Epstein files?
Yeah, I would.